Hello, my name is Carolyn Mills, and I am the host of the podcast Cheers. That's one woman's opinion. Today we'll be looking at Cheers, Season 1, Episode 20, Someone Single, Someone Blue. It first aired on March 3rd, 1983. It was directed by James Burrows. It was written by Glenn Charles, Les Charles, James Burrows, and David Angle. And we talked, I believe, I don't know if it was the last episode, but it was a recent episode. Engel was killed in the 9/11 attacks with his wife, Lynn, sadly. Guest cast, Glynis Johns as Helen Chambers. Glynis Johns died in 2024 at the age of 101 from natural causes. Um, She was a Broadway actress, movie actress, and obviously she was on TV, at least on this show. She was probably best known as Mrs. Banks in the movie Mary Poppins. And if you ever get a chance, YouTube her singing the song Send in the Clowns from the Stephen Sondheim show from the Stephen Sondheim musical A Little Night Music. She is one of my favorite singers for this song. I think the only person that actually comes close to how much I enjoy hearing that is my friend Amy, um, who is also a phenomenal singer and has done that song in local theaters. But yeah, Glynis John's performance of that is just phenomenal. So check that out. Anyway, back to the guest cast. Duncan Ross played Boggs, and Ross died in 1987, cause not specified. He has also appeared in shows such as Winds of War and Remington Steele. Dean Dittman as Harrison Fielder, and he died in 1989, and the cause was not specified. And he's also appeared in shows such as Who's the Boss and Designing Women. Paul Wilson as Glenn. Um, I believe it's in the credits of this show. He is actually credited as playing Greg with two G's. However, his character's name is Glenn because Coach actually refers to him as Glenn, so that was just a little error there. And John Ratzenberger as Cliff Clavin. Cheers is filmed in front of a live studio audience, was spoken by John Ratzenberger for this episode. In our summary in the cold open, Coach tells Sam that he met a customer who was on the Titanic. Sam tells Coach to call him over when he hears an interesting story. Coach tells him he has an even better story than the Titanic and then he brings him over to Glenn, who knows all the words to the Bonanza theme. Glenn sings the song and keeps singing until Sam falls down, where Everybody Knows Your Name plays. Norm comes in and Cliff asks him about his search for a job. Norm says he has stopped looking and is now begging for a job. Diane tells them her mother was on the phone. She's coming to the bar, and Diane is surprised because she says her mother would never be caught dead in a place like this. They take offense, so Diane explains that her mother just doesn't like bars. Norm says that the bars can be a very sad place. Cliff asks Diane how come her mother is rich but she's not, and Diane explains she didn't want that money. She didn't want to be going through life handed money on a silver tray. And then someone puts a tip on her tray and she thanks him. I love the timing in that section. The don't want money on a tray, and then money's literally put on her tray. It's very good. Mrs. Chambers comes into the bar. Diane introduces everyone, not allowing them to talk to her mother, except for Coach. Coach tells her that his other nickname was Red, R-E-A-D, because he once read a book. Sam tells Mrs. Chambers it's nice to meet her. Mrs. Chambers says that Diane has told her a lot about Sam, and then adds, "You're almost as handsome as she says you think you are." Sam's actually trying to figure out at that point if he's being insulted or complimented. Mrs. Chambers tells Diane that Diane has to get married tomorrow. If she doesn't, her mom loses her half of Mr. Chambers' estate. She explains that Diane's dad was afraid Diane would never get married, so he put a clause in the will that if Diane does not marry by the time he has been gone for 10 years, her mother would lose everything. And I don't really know a whole lot about wills and whatnot, but is this like a legal thing? Can you actually put this as a clause in your will? Um, just curious. Doesn't seem like something to be legal. Obviously good for the show, but I'm just curious if it's a real thing. She says it only has to be in name only and just for a couple of days. Boggs, Mrs. Chambers' chauffeur, comes in and offers to marry Diane. Mrs. Chambers tells him, I said in a pinch, Boggs, there's an S on there. Carla tells Diane's mom that Diane has a thing for the bartender. Diane denies it and her mom asks, She likes Red. He's dumb enough to be your father. Carla clarifies she's referring to Sam. It's interesting because she does call him the bartender, and obviously Sam does tend bar, but you think she would say the owner since he's the owner of the bar. But Diane continues to deny it. Mrs. Chambers asks Diane if it's true. Diane says she'd rather marry Boggs. Mrs. Chambers begs Diane to talk to Sam because she doesn't think she can make it if she loses all of her money. Diane reluctantly agrees. Diane hems and haws. She finally gets around to asking Sam to marry her, and Sam says, Boy, this clone must be doing its stuff. She explains about the clause. Sam tells her, Marriage and me don't mix. And if you remember, if you remember, Sam has been married in the past, and I think episode 2 or 3, we meet his ex-wife Debbie. Diane says it's just a business arrangement, but Sam refuses. Diane tells her mother that Sam said no. Her mother is distraught. Sam sees this and agrees to marry Diane. Mrs. Chambers runs over and almost kisses Sam on the cheek. And if you haven't seen it, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've seen these episodes, but I say almost kisses on the cheek because she does the kind of like I'm sure she's British, I'm assuming British thing, where she basically comes up to him and goes to each side and goes, does it hit the cheek? Does it hit the cheek? She then leaves to go get the justice of the peace. Diane thanks Sam. He asks her where she wants to go on their honeymoon. Diane tells him, as usual, Mr. Malone has his brain caught in his zipper. Norm asks Coach if this is the first wedding at Cheers. Coach says Frankie Flattery got married at the bar, and his wife caught him in the pool room with another woman and then shot him dead in the alley. He then shows Frankie's ashes, which are behind the bar. And again, this makes sense for the comedy part of the show, but why would a person will their ashes to a bar? But then again, I could see Norm doing that, so maybe he's like a Norm. Sam, Diane, and Mrs. Chambers returns with a license and justice of peace. Justice of peace. Mrs. Chambers says that they need a witness, and Carla replies, every accident needs a witness. Coach tells Sam that he knew Sam and Diane would get married. I'm sorry, would get together. Sam reminds him it's only temporary, and Coach says, I knew that too. Norm asks Cliff why he never got married. Cliff says that it's not fair to ask a woman to be the wife of a mailman. He says you never know if he's coming back or not. And Norm says, Right, somewhere out there is a beagle with your name on it. Cliff agrees. Mrs. Chambers tells them that it's time to start. The Justice of Peace asks for the license. And then he says, The groom's name is Schwinn? Sam takes it back from him, telling him that's his bicycle license. Mrs. Chambers asks them to lose their aprons. Car- Coach and Carla, who are acting as the two witnesses, take off their aprons. Carla says, I didn't know it was going to be this formal. Sam and Diane stand together, ready to get married. Sam reminds her, no emotions. The man starts the ceremony, and Diane watches Sam. A woman walks by, and Sam checks her out. Diane becomes upset. She tells him it'd be nice if he didn't look at other women during the wedding ceremony. They argue, and Mrs. Chambers asks them to continue. Sam tells them to hold on. He tells Diane, "You know you're starting to sound like my wife." Diane tells him, "It would be nice if during the ceremony you didn't drool." I didn't pick this line as a favorite line, because there's a couple I like better, but the whole drooling line always makes me laugh. And Shelley Long's delivery, of course, as always, is perfect. As they argue, Mrs. Chambers says, "Children, please." Sam responds, "Hey, just butt out, Mom." As they continue to argue, the Justice of Peace asks Sam if he has the ring. Sam and Diane yell at him, "Shut up." Mrs. Chambers tells them they are making a mockery of marriage and they are not getting married today. Mrs. Chambers is feeling down, realizing she is now poor again. Diane tells her that it's her dad's fault. Mrs. Chambers explains that her dad was concerned about Diane. She says that he loved Diane. She even says he loved her, but loved a good joke more. Then adds, "Spencer, wherever you are tonight, I hope you are frying." And this is the first time I noticed this when I was actually going over the summary. Diane's father's name is Spencer. I wonder if this was intentional because Diane Spencer was Princess Di's maiden name before she became Diane Charles. Wait, before she married Prince Charles. I forgot what her name was then. But anyway, that was her maiden name, Diane Spencer, when she was younger. And this was about the time that either they got married or were together. So I'm curious if that's was intentional that they made the father's name Spencer because of her name being Diane. Sam comes out of his office. Diane tells him she and her mom will lock up. Sam asks how they will get home, and Diane's mom says that Boggs is waiting for them. Sam apologizes to Diane and to her mom. He Her mom confesses she's afraid of being poor. She says, "I was poor before I met your father, and it took me years to really forget how being poor felt." Boggs comes in and says he heard and proposes to Mrs. Chambers. She asks him if he's lost his mind, saying, "I only accepted your familiarity because I was afraid of class warfare." He says that he knows that. Then he tells her that he has money stashed away because he's been embezzling money for her family for almost 25 years. Mrs. Chambers calls him clever, and she asks him how much, and he tells her that according to Emily Post, for those of you who are not familiar with Emily Post, she was alive in I think she was born around 1860 something, and she died in the early 1900s. Well, in the first half of the century, I think. Well, anyway, Emily Post is was a expert on etiquette. So when people refer to Emily Post, it's referring to etiquette. So anyway, he says to her that according to Emily Post, a lady doesn't ask her chauffeur how much he stole from her dead husband. Another great line. There's a lot of good lines in this episode, and it was actually hard to choose the top two. Um, because there's definitely some really good ones, which is why I have them sprinkled throughout too. However, he tells her that he is very comfortable. He invites her to dinner to discuss their future, and she tells him, "I've always found the back of your head enormously attractive." Another great line referencing to the fact that obviously as a chauffeur, what she would see would be the back of his head. He tells her that he sensed it. He asks her to drive. She looks back to Diane and Sam and says, "Kinky." I gave this episode 5 out of 5 beer nuts. It was a great episode. I love that they got Glynis Johns to play Mrs. Chambers. Been a fan of hers for a while. She was awesome in the role, and you clearly can see more and more that Sam and Diane are attracted to each other, even though they're still continuing to deny it. However, we only have two episodes left after this episode. Showdown Part 1 and Showdown Part 2, and that's the end of season 1. The MVP for this episode, I chose Ted Danson. A little bit hard to choose between Ted and Shelley. I picked Ted Danson because I love his delivery of the "Shut up, mom" line. And he's had a lot of other deliveries like the "marriage doesn't mix." At one point, he tells her, "Never trust anybody in a wedding dress, especially a woman." I mean, he just does a phenomenal job in this episode. But it was a toss up between the two. Best dressed, Helen Chambers, when she comes in. Obviously she's a rich lady, so she's got better clothes than the people that usually hang out in a bar. But I do like her outfits. My favorite line, when Diane says that her mother does not like bars, Norm says, "Bars can be sad places. Some people spend their whole lives in bars. Just yesterday, some guy sat next to me for 11 hours." Runner up for favorite line, from the cold open. Coach says, "That's the first person I've ever met that was on the Titanic." Sam asks, "He survived the Titanic?" Coach replies, "I forgot to ask." Here's a little known fact. Lucille Ball, you probably know that name from I Love Lucy. She was offered the role of Helen Chambers before Glynis Johns, and she turned it down. I do not know why. I tried to find that. I just saw that she turned it down. Question of the week. Forgetting about what happens in future episodes, if you've seen the entire series or other episodes, whatnot. But forgetting about any future episodes, just looking at where we are now, do you think Sam and Diane should end up together? If you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe on whatever you're listening to. You can also join the Facebook group, Cheers, That's One Woman's Opinion. So I got these I told you about getting the microphone here and the headphones. The problem is, every so often I crash into the wires. I'm not used to having wires. So anyway, you can also follow us on Instagram at Cheers One Woman's Opinion Podcast. Our new Twitter account, you can follow us also on at One Woman Opinion. I just can't call it X, it feels weird. But for those of you that know, it is X. And of course, you can email us with questions, comments, etc. at Cheers One Woman Podcast. You know what? I've been telling you guys this email wrong. I just noticed that. I apologize. It's Cheers One Woman. I'll fix that afterwards. But it's Cheers One Woman's Opinion Podcast at gmail.com. I didn't even notice I'd been saying that wrong. I was actually working on something today and I happened to notice it. Our next episode is Season 1, Episode 21, Showdown Part 1. And that's One Woman's Opinion. Thank you.